Here now a CNN major battleground call. Governor Bush is the winner in Ohio, and he grabs the Buckeye State's 21 electoral votes.
This is a state that he absolutely had to have, given what happened in Florida, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. It is also a state Republicans have to have because they just don't win the White House without it, especially with the loss in Illinois. And it now suggests that there is at least a little more optimism, not optimism, but at least hope on the Bush camp. That's right, hope. Because if you look at all the other states, before we get west, if Bush can win, Tennessee, Arkansas, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, if the electoral map begins to stabilize.
It's also a
CNN
state.
is making another call right now. Governor Bush moving very quickly in Tennessee, embarrassing Vice President Gore by snatching his state's 11 electoral votes.
Yes.
We wish to make a correction about something that was said earlier. I believe that Woodrow Wilson got elected president without carrying his home state of New Jersey.
The second time.
Yeah, that's the second time, in 1916.
So any of you taking notes, please jot that down on your chart. But this
And there was James Polk who won the presidency without Tennessee.
Yes, but having won Tennessee, having won the vice president's home state, this scenario for Bush now begins to look at least conceivable. You can see the Bush people saying, okay, if we take Arkansas, if we take Missouri, if we take Wisconsin, if we take Minnesota and Iowa, this is what it's come down to, then we get to the West with enough electoral votes that we can withstand a loss in California. I'll tell you, friends, it becomes more and more interesting as every state is called.
I would call
It's really
Ohio.
so. Look at that. It's Gore now has 192, Bush 185, according to my quick
I'd
computation.
call Ohio the Keep Hope Alive state for the George Bush campaign. And what we found in the exit poll is that one of the reasons why he won it was gun owners. A lot of gun owners. 40% of the voters in Ohio were gun owners, and they went almost 60% for George W. Bush.
We should say, too, that about Ohio, that it's been about a week and a half that Al Gore pulled his ads from that state because the polling information they were doing inside their campaign told them they really didn't have much of a shot. They pulled out a good bit of money.
And if we go back to our keys and we talk about social issues, the gun ownership issue was one that the Gore campaign thought was going to drive women away from Bush. At least in Ohio, we can at least make the speculation that working class Democrats, gun owners, had a problem with Al Gore's gun control stand. We'll find out a little later.
But Bill Clinton won that state twice. Ohio was in the Clinton camp both in 1992 narrowly and in 1996 narrowly.
That's right. Now it's back to the Republican camp where it has been most often.
Because Bill Clinton didn't suffer on those social issues the way Al Gore might be. I think what we're trying to say again and again is that the more states that are called, the more this race takes on the fascinating perspective that we thought it would be before the polls ever opened. We don't know who the next president of the United States is going to be. We may not know for an hour and a half, 2.5 hours. Who can say?
Yep, and in Pennsylvania, in a number of these states, it was the late-breaking voters who appear to have made the difference. They clearly delivered Pennsylvania for Al Gore, which was going for Bush early on. They shifted in the last few days.
Bill, I want to, just for clarification, if we have a minute to do this, it's, what, 9:20 on the East Coast. The polls closed in Ohio almost 2 hours ago. Help us understand the process. I mean, in some of these states, just so our viewers can understand, we've been able to call the state literally the moment the polls closed. Not the case in Ohio. What had to happen in the interim for us to be able to call it?
I think what we had to do was look at some key precincts in Ohio to find out what was actually going on in the real vote, because our exit poll wasn't definitive enough to allow us to call Ohio. There was too much margin of error. So we had to look at the real votes as they started to be counted. And we have precincts selected around the state of Ohio. People call in and tell us the vote totals in those precincts, and those are real votes, and they help us look at the exit poll and see if the exit poll is giving us a strong clue. And also, if there are a number of absentee ballots out, they usually count those very quickly. We look and see how the absentee ballot count is going.
If you're just joining us, you've missed a lot, but there's still a lot more to come. This is how the electoral map looks right now at 20 minutes after 9 Eastern Time. Texas Governor George Bush is leading slimly, 185 electoral votes to Vice President Gore's 182. As I say, lots of excitement so far, but still lots more to come given the closeness of those numbers.
It is remarkable, Bernie. I mean, any which way you cut it. There's a lot to look out for there. All the states in yellow, I think it's, what, 9 states now, if you count at least a portion of the state of Maine, which we've, given 3 of its 4 electoral votes to Al Gore. We don't know, we can't say who the other one will go to. One has to assume it's got to go to either Gore or Bush, but we don't know.
Would you mind one piece of preliminary conceivable mischief to put on the table?
How about 2 pieces?
It's all right. Well, the first one is if these states break a certain way, we could wind up with a 269-269 tie with no one getting a majority of electoral votes. It is not out of the question yet. And then we'll be here till January, folks.
Right in these very chairs in this very studio. Do you think they'd feed us?
Then it will go to the House of Representatives, and it will go to the new House of Representatives, and we don't know how that's going yet.
When we come back, John King, Candy Crowley in Austin, Texas, and Nashville, Tennessee. We'll check in to see what they're saying and what they're thinking when we come back. Welcome, viewers watching CNN's election night coverage around the world on CNN International. You are witnessing a cliffhanger as Al Gore and George Bush battle to become 43rd President of the United States. Look at the closeness of this race at 25 minutes past 9 p.m. Eastern Time. The Texas governor with 185 electoral votes. Nipping at his heels, the Vice President of the United States, Al Gore, with 182. And Judy Woodruff standing by to report on the polls that close in about 35 minutes.
And we should do some, I wouldn't call it speculation, but just look ahead. Look at this map and see what it tells us. Well, the map has disappeared, so I'll tell you. We look at this map and we see that through the Midwest, you've got these states that have yet to be called, the Midwest and the South. You've got Iowa, which hasn't closed yet. You've got Missouri, too close to call. Minnesota and Wisconsin, we can't call yet. And West Virginia with 5 electoral votes. Now, look west. By every poll number, even though the Bush people made a play for it, the Gore campaign has to be looking at the state of California with its 54 electoral votes as though they were looking at a prime sirloin about to be served to them.
And we should point out, they spent all of $100 in the state of California, while the Bush people spent something like $12 million, and the Republican committee.
But if you look at those states that have yet to be decided in the middle of the country, and just for the sake of argument, Bush takes them, and then you move west, and Bush takes those states, those sort of in the Mountain West, and Gore takes California, the speculation that we've been doing all week becomes true. States like Washington and Oregon, and maybe Nevada, and maybe New Mexico, which we can't yet call, may be the states that hold the balance of power. This is not the kind of case where in elections past we sat here really knowing that there was no way for the inevitable to be forestalled. We don't know how these states are going to break, and we may be looking still at an incredibly close contest.
And it's crazy to try to make a prediction, because we've seen that many of the states that predictably were counted in one corner were not going to be going that way this year until the very end, when all the votes were counted.
And still, the only states outstanding, aside from the races that we are not prepared to call yet, Judy, you've got 2, 4, 5 states at 10 o'clock, and then Idaho, Iowa, Montana, Nevada, Utah. Then I have California, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and at midnight, those 4 I just quoted are from 11 p.m. At midnight, there's just one outstanding state, Alaska.
And just 3 electoral votes.
It does seem, though, that the fears of the Bush campaign in one sense have been realized, or at least their plan B. If they were going to lose Florida and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Illinois, all of which they have lost, their argument was, okay, we can swoop up electoral votes in all those second-tier states like Missouri and Wisconsin and Minnesota. No offense to those states, they just have fewer electoral votes. That's what they're going to have to do to make this race close before you get out to the West Coast.
A lot of things have to come together. One thing that has come together tonight, it's something for the First Lady. We called it about 27 minutes ago, and that is that she has won a Senate seat from the state of New York. And for a little reaction from somebody who's been covering the White House, let's go to John King. You're in Nashville, John, but we understand you're privy to the thinking of none other than President Clinton.
That's right, Judy. And since you last visited Nashville, we should tell you they've started the music here at what Al Gore hopes will be a victory party. Well, I was checking in on the president, actually, to see what he was doing on behalf of the vice president, and it was during a telephone conversation with Las Vegas radio station KCET to make a pitch to voters in Nevada to vote for the Vice President Gore that we called that Senate race for the First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. The president saw that, and he told the radio station, quote, "I'm the first president in history with a wife in the Senate, and I like it." We're also told at this hour the president helping the First Lady work on her speech. He interrupted his radio calls on behalf of the Vice President to help the First Lady prepare her acceptance speech, her big historic moment tonight in New York. Back to you.
All right, John King also joining us, I think, from Austin, Texas. Candy Crowley. Candy, you're there. Thoughts from some of the folks around Governor Bush at this hour? I know you've been listening to some of what Jeff Greenfield is saying about how even though it's harder for Governor Bush to put a 270 together, it's still very possible.
Absolutely, and it's still very possible to them. Obviously, they're heartened by Ohio, but they always had Ohio in their column. They really needed that one, but it's a major boost. It was certainly a major boost to this crowd, which when they heard it, and I think you can hear them now, CNN is on a big screen, so they know when they're on TV. When Ohio was called for Bush, it was a big energizer for this crowd. It's bound to be in the Bush campaign as well. Look, I should also tell you that the Bush campaign, despite the fact that we have called both Florida and Pennsylvania for Vice President Gore, they don't believe it's over yet in those two states, just to put that in there. So they're still fighting. They also were on the phone knowing that the West Coast becomes more and more important. But I will tell you, looking at this map and putting these electoral votes together, one of the things that the Bush strategist always believed was that it might come down to places like Tennessee, like Arkansas, like Wisconsin. And in fact, in the last day of this campaign, George Bush was in Wisconsin, Iowa, Arkansas, in Tennessee, all of which now bode very heavily in terms of how this campaign is going to come out.
Candy, can I just ask you, if they're looking west, the Bush campaign, and they must be at least dealing with the possibility that California, Washington, and Oregon may all go to Gore, then they've got to be, they're just about out of states, aren't they? They have to win almost everything left out that hasn't yet been decided for them to get to 270. I mean...
Yes, except for I can tell you that they are not about to concede Oregon or Washington. Bush made a major play for both of those states. He was in California till the very end, and while that seemed like California dreaming, they do not believe that Oregon and Washington were pipe dreams. They believe they have real chances there, and as you know, Ralph Nader is a factor, so that gives them a boost as well.
Candy, you say you're suggesting that maybe there was some dreaming going on in California, but it was expensive dreaming. I mean, didn't the Republican Party spend $12 million added to another million or so on the part of the Bush campaign for California? They must have thought they had a real shot, or have a real shot. I don't want to talk in the past tense here.
I have to tell you that every time we talk to them about California, because it's been trending so Democratic over the past couple of elections, they would say, look, no, we believe we have a real shot here. Now, part of that was based on turnout. They had a very aggressive turnout effort in California. But there were also those candidates down ballot, and in California, Republicans have felt abandoned by presidential candidates in the past, and George Bush felt a real obligation to be in California until the very end for the California Republican Party. So he was there. He made a major effort there, both in monetary terms and in time terms. They always said, look, we've got a chance in California, but a lot of it had to do with the California Republican Party and all of those Republicans down ballot.
Candy Crowley, John King, thank you. We'll be back with more of our continuing coverage this election night 2000 from CNN headquarters in Atlanta and our correspondents in the field.
Log on to CNN.com for all the Election Day information you need, from the latest polls, projections, and results on demand. It's all at CNN.com.